Hey guys! Today I'm going to talk about Alexander Pope's mock epic, The Rape of the Lock, and its connection to commodity, religion, and Pope's life. According to Longman, Pope was the greatest English poet between John Milton and William Wordsworth. However, he did not always receive that high praise during his life. In fact, during his time, critics were ruthless and accused him of being obscene, seditious, vain, and worst of all, a bad poet. In a minute, we will look at two possible explanations for these harsh accusations. One literary critic, Helen Deutsch, actually gives credit to Pope for catering to his popular audience, female readers. His translations of the classics, like Homer's The Iliad and Odyssey, gave women who had not been taught Greek or Latin access to these literary classics. The connection between Pope's translation and The Rape of the Lock is important, and one we will return to later, so keep in mind that during the time when Pope was expanding and republishing The Rape of the Lock, he was also translating Homer's epics into heroic couplets. One explanation for Pope's harsh critiques would be his physical deformity and illness. When Pope was 12, he had tuberculosis of the spine, which stunted his growth and left him with a hunchback. The illness also weakened his immune system and overall physical health, and he was plagued with migraines, nausea, and fever throughout the rest of his life. Deutsch connects Pope's identity as physically deformed with femininity. She argues that this compromise of masculine agency influences his decision to rewrite epic heroism, including his use of mock epic, and his allegiance to a female audience. She states that deformity allies itself with femininity in their coincident weaknesses. Pope could not stand eye level with other men, needed to have special seating if he was going to sit among other men, and could not participate in physical activity like other men could. Deutsch said his deformity made him a spectacle, and somehow a commodity in the market. It places him uniquely in the female world, and his existence in this miniature world will inspire and influence him to write the miniature epic, The Rape of the Lock. Undoubtedly, his Catholic heritage and practice alienated him more from popular society than anything else. While the Toleration Act of 1689 allowed for more relaxed tolerance of dissenting religious practice, other laws, such as the Test Act of 1673 and 1678, continued to prohibit Catholics from holding official positions. Pope is exiled through these laws, as he could not participate in English society as his friends could and did. One critic, Alex Hernandez, refers to these anti-Catholic laws as emasculating, particularly in reference to Pope. Again, we see Pope's link to this feminine identity. Both his physical body and his spiritual affiliation keep him cast as an outsider among proper British patriots, an issue that will arise in his writing. First, I want to discuss the genre of The Rape of the Lock, which is mock epic. We discussed mock last week and its ability to subvert reality and language. Again, we have an instance where a classic tradition is being applied to an unlikely subject, the loss of a curl of hair. The piece is inspired by a true story. As the Longman states, when Robert Lord Peter cut a love lock from the head of Arabella Fermor without her permission, the two young people quarreled bitterly. The event led to the estrangement of both families, and that is when Pope's friend John Carl asked him to write the poem in hopes the family would be able to laugh at the situation and move on. Kenneth Brooks praises Pope's choice of genre as the best way to reveal the ridiculousness of the subject and expose the vanity at the heart of the fashionable world. In class discussion, we will look for crossovers between classic epic form and this mock epic. Remember, Pope is writing the Iliad and the Odyssey during this time, so we can expect to see some parallels. I want to specifically question the idea of Belinda as the epic hero with a comparison to Achilles from Homer's Iliad. Also in class, we will work on a handout featuring Clarissa's speech in Canto 5 in reference to Deutsch's comments here. She states the epic hero chooses between a short and glorious and a long and undistinguished life, and thereby gains the distinction of action. The bourgeoisie heroine chooses between the display and use of her beauty, between the coquette's deadly charms and the wife's virtuous productivity, and thereby gains the invisible virtue of submission. Typically, the hero is aiming for eternal glory. Again, think of Achilles. But she says the heroine binary in this story is far more passive and still leads to her invisible submission. How does Clarissa's speech support Deutsch's idea? How does the speech function within the epic tradition? Are there connections we can make to other epics? Deutsch also points out the way Pope exchanges items of glory and power from the Iliad to items of commodity and fashion in The Rape of the Lock. In class, we will examine a speech made by Achilles in Pope's translation of the Iliad with the Baron's speech in Canto 4, lines 133 through 140. This leads us to our next area of focus, commodity and material objects in The Rape of the Lock. The featured image here is called The Toilet and was painted by Robert Sayer in 1780. In this image, we can see the focus of the woman as she stares at her reflection in the mirror. The many items on her vanity are similar to what is described in Pope's poem. Keep this image in mind. We will go back to this in class. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this. Hernandez argues that The Rape of the Lock is a text about things and the consumption of things as much as it is about the characters consuming them. Belinda's dressing table is evidence of the cultural obsession with consumables. Due to the growing trade and the expanding middle class, there are more people in population with expendable income. In class, we will closely examine the description of Belinda's table and discuss the ways the poem reflects or comments on the rising market. I also want you to think about the ways Belinda herself is treated as commodity. Deutsch says, like the private collections of curiosities which abounded in the 18th century, The Rape of the Lock offers the spectator a continuous game of visual connections between great and small, domestic and exotic. One particularly interesting connection that's made in this poem is between commodity and religion. Hernandez takes a particular focus with the inclusion of the Bible on the list of items on Belinda's dressing table. He argues both the Bible and the cross necklace are examples of how religion had become part of the fashionable market. The Church of England was returning to a sola scriptura mentality, which placed the sole authority of the Christian faith and teachings on the biblical scripture, which meant the Bible was acting as a physical representation of the Christian faith. Religion was also heavily connected to patriotism, and, as Hernandez states, to be British also meant to be Protestant. Here we return to a key struggle in Pope's life. He considered himself both an Englishman and a Roman Catholic, according to Hernandez. However, the church, and subsequently the government, did not view patriotism or religious practice in the same separate fashion. The religious signifiers stand out in a poem full of market objects. Considering Pope's personal history, the fact that the families of the real-life version of this event were also Roman Catholic, and considering the return to sole scriptural authority within the Church of England, what is the Bible doing in this poem? What, if anything, is Pope satirizing with its inclusion? How does the description of Belinda's dressing table subvert religious practice? Thank you guys for playing along in this unusual presentation style. When we meet in class, I will have handouts with quotes, questions, and portions of the test that we will discuss. In class, we will closely read Clarissa's speech in Canto 5, discuss the genre of mock epic and how the subject matter comments on the genre, or if it does at all, and discuss the commodity in the poem with a focus on the connection between fashion and religion. I also want you to pay attention to Pope's use of the frail china imagery throughout the poem, and make sure to closely read the description of her dressing table, as we will discuss both in class. Thanks again.